tough few days for Los Angeles, and I want to start by thanking the community and the love that has poured out for Nipsey Hussle. We learned that another young life was cut short by a gun in our city. And the pain of that in a city that's experienced the safest decade in 10 years, by many measures the safest city in America, but a place still, as I've always said, where one death is one too many. Nipsey Hussle was an artist who touched our city and the lives far beyond the city of angels throughout this country and this world. He was somebody who was a gifted and brilliant artist, an entrepreneur who found global success, who was working closely with this city to help save lives and transform lives even as he was doing that for himself. He was a tireless advocate for the young people of this city and of this world, to lift them up with the possibility of not being imprisoned by where you come from or past mistakes, but the possibility of what comes in the future. And his impact on our city was deep. You'll hear that from Councilmember Marquise Harris-Dawson in a moment. My own office was able to work with him on a number of initiatives to bring more African Americans in the tech industry, to stand up businesses for people who have been involved with the criminal justice system. And the news that we have to share this morning is that the hardworking men of the Los Angeles Police Department, together with the strong relationships we have within the community, have identified the person believed to be responsible for this devastating crime. He is 29-year-old Eric Holder. And in just a few moments, we'll hear from Chief Moore. He'll share some details about that and ask for the public's help in bringing justice to Nipsey's family. And if anywhere out there has information about this individual or this crime, we urge you to call LAPD's South Bureau homicide at 213-485-4341. Nipsey's death has sent shockwaves across this city and across this globe. But we're also here for all Angelenos whose lives have been cut short as well. Even though we see homicides down this year to date by over 17%, there have been 11 homicides throughout the city in the last week alone. 11 lives, 11 possibilities, 11 dreams, 11 family members, 11 friends who were cut short. And just because they didn't make the headlines, their loved ones are just as deeply grieving as so many friends and family are for Nipsey. These individuals should still be here with us today. Fact is, there's been an uptick in violence and shootings in South LA in the 77th Division in recent weeks, and we intend to use the strength of this city to roll that back. A strength that isn't just about badges and guns, it is mostly about, first and foremost, the strength of our community relationships. Yes, of course, with the police and from the police, but the churches, the community groups, the neighbors, our gang reduction and youth development intervention workers and prevention workers who know the names after many years of work of people who live and play in parks in these neighborhoods, who go to school in these neighborhoods, who earn their living in these neighborhoods. And I'm deeply concerned, and I will commit everything this city has together with the county, and we're blessed to have Supervisor Mark Lee Thomas here, and the City Council to turn this around. I want to thank the folks that are here. As I mentioned, Chief Moore, Councilmember Harris-Dawson, also Councilmember Monica Rodriguez, who chairs our Public Safety Committee, Commission President Steve Soboroff, and all the LAPD command staff and officers, community leaders that are here with us today, and the amazing folks from our grid teams, all those intervention workers who, when the bullets fly, go out to the streets and run towards them. Through the hard work and commitment of these Angelenos and the strength of this fabric, which I'm so proud has been for many years put together, stitched together in this city to be an example for this nation. We've made extraordinary strides. That coalition has helped us get over 14,000 guns off our streets, has helped us bring in South LA the safest year in recorded memory, the lowest homicides, second lowest number of homicides, in 50 years in Los Angeles, and most importantly, working hard to strengthen relationships even further. Councilmember Harris-Dawson and myself worked very hard to bring the Community Safety Partnership to Hyde Park, once seen as the deadliest place in Los Angeles. This is an assignment of 5 years for officers so they can get to know the names of people who are in that neighborhood and vice versa. and those relationships have turned a corner in Hyde Park. In 2017, there were no homicides, 3 last year, but that's way down from what we saw year over year over year. This is about young people of color being able to have opportunities in their lives, maybe become police officers themselves, get to know those who police with them and for them. And this is about hope for the future. We have a reason to feel hopeful even in the moments of our most extreme pain, and that's by turning to each other. We saw that, and we've seen that since Nipsey was taken from us. That love that is out there, and I ask everybody who's grieving for him to grieve for the families of those other victims as well, whose lives were just as important and just as significant. What we see now is yet another reason to be hopeful is this coalition and the help the public can give Nipsey's family and the family of those other homicide victims, that at least justice can be served. And I would say to anybody out there too, the absolute worst way to pay back Nipsey's loss, somebody we lost at the hands of violence, is with more violence. And we know that there is much more love than hate, much more love than violence out there. And we intend to give space for people to grieve, space for people to mourn, and space for people to come together. Right now, I want to turn it over to a man who knew Nipsey, worked very closely with him, helped his businesses get stood up, helped him to make sure he was part of the transformation that this man is leading in his district along Crenshaw Boulevard, and keeping African American businesses there, helping young people have avenues of success that we see in other parts of town. And I want to thank him. I know his heart is grieving and is heavy, but please welcome Councilmember Marquise Harris-Dawson.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor and Chief and officers of the Los Angeles Police Department and all the assembled elected officials and community leaders that are with us today. We lost in South Los Angeles an extremely bright light over this past weekend. Nipsey Hussle is a shining example of the best of what we can be and the best of what it means to seek and carry out a redemptive charge. This is a young man who is the son and grandson of South Los Angeles, both from an immigrant family and from a traditional African-American family, who saw much of the devastation that we all recorded over the 1990s and beyond. As a young person who witnessed this, at some point in his life he made the decision that he was going to be part of the solution, and he was going to lead the charge on the solution, deciding and taking a very firm stance that he lived out, that if South Los Angeles is to ever have what it deserves, if the community is ever to be treated the way it should be treated, that we had to own and build it for ourselves. And he spent the last half-dozen years trying to carry out that vision while he built a very successful music career. And so his gift and his insistence on us living our best life went from the highest level to developing really 3 strong organizations and businesses in South Los Angeles to the lowest level. And so there were many occasions where I stood with him on that very parking lot and was fascinated by the fact that the small business owner next door knew him by first name, as well as the person struggling with addiction or homelessness knew him by his first name and had watched him grow up. And so it is a dear loved one that we have lost, and a demonstration of the very true moray that none of us are safe until all of us are safe. One of Nipsey's most well-known songs says, "Bullets don't have names, and as long as they're flying, all of us are in danger." And so we continue to celebrate his legacy, and we ask the community to do so in a way that is consistent with his story, consistent with his gift, and consistent with his promise. At the same time, I would also echo the comments of the mayor, and I know the chief will talk about this later. We have an uptick of violence in South Los Angeles, gun violence in particular. Again, it is not off the charts, or it is not like things that we've seen in years past, certainly not in decades past. But Nipsey is an example for all of us that any life lost is a life too many. And so we ask everybody to work together, to stand together, and to fight together to create the kind of streets and communities that we deserve to live in, where people can live out their highest and best potentials. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Council Member. Next, I'd like to ask Supervisor Mark Ridley Thomas to step forward, who's been one of the first people in this city when he served on the City Council to work on those intervention and prevention programs that are part of that fabric, and he is one of the strongest threads in this city. Mark Ridley Thomas.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Councilman, to the Chief and the Commission President. I'm simply here on behalf of the County of Los Angeles, collaborating with the City of Los Angeles to declare that we pursue justice and at the same time we embrace peace. It seems to me that the uptick in violence, as it has been referenced, is intolerable. And there's no point in trying to minimize its impact. Anytime it strikes, it seems to me that we have to be vigilant in our pushback. And I think we have to be imaginative in that regard through traditional police methodologies, but also through enhanced methods that are time-tested in terms of community involvement. And that's essentially what will make the ultimate difference. We have to do more. The County of Los Angeles, in collaboration with the City of Los Angeles, sets that as its goal and objective. The Department of Public Health recognized the uptick in violence to be a matter of its concern, therefore the establishment of the Office of Violence Prevention. And this office is designed to deal with the issues of not only prevention, but treatment for those who are the loved ones of homicide victims and other victims of violence that don't result in fatalities. So today, it seems to me that it's very, very important for us to make it clear that we will be increasingly proactive in this regard. The Health Department is extending its hours beyond the ordinary hours of closing at 4 all the way to 7 to ensure support for anyone who is in need. Never underestimate the trauma that is inflicted on families and communities pursuant to violence. The issue of gun violence cannot be minimized. We teach, we preach, we practice the notion of controlling this phenomenon. Now, it seems to me we have yet another opportunity to accelerate in terms of what our commitments are. And so this coming Friday, the 5th, will be more announcements in this regard that were frankly already in place prior to this tragic death that we focus on today, but essentially to say that our work is cut out for us and we will not shrink. We will step up to the responsibility to pursue more violence prevention in our communities, starting with the area that is often described as South Los Angeles, where the problem is persistent. And we cannot ignore that reality. Our obligation is to address it and do so with all of our capacity. Thank you very kindly.
Thank you very much, Supervisor. Two leaders in public safety, one who oversees our City Council Public Safety Committee, as I mentioned, Monica Rodriguez, and we thank her for her leadership in being here, and the President of our Police Commission, the civilians that oversee our departments will speak, and then Chief Moore will give you details and ask for some help as well, and then we'll answer any questions. So, Chairwoman Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor. And as been stated, we all grieve right now with the tragic circumstances around Nipsey's loss of life, but we don't also forget the individuals that have also been lost as a result of the tragic violence that has occurred on our streets, whether in South Los Angeles or any other part in the city of Los Angeles. It's really important that we as a community come together and not come back with violence. It's important that we help collaborate with the Los Angeles Police Department. It was through the collaboration of the community and our local police officers that we were able to apprehend suspects in a case in my district. But so often, families are not getting the justice that they deserve in apprehending the perpetrators of the crimes throughout the city. So it is incredibly important that everyone in the community find an opportunity to communicate with LAPD, to build that relationship, and to share the information that they do know, so that we can apprehend the perpetrators of these horrific crimes, and that more families in our city don't have to suffer the tragic consequences of loss. There's often opportunities for each of us to play a role, and we invite you to be part of how we assure the safety in our streets so that we do not lose any more of our children or any one more member of our families. And we invite you to be a partner with us, with the Los Angeles Police Department and the City Council, so that we can assure that we create the kind of environments in our communities that we will all be proud of, that we will remain a safe city. And it's important that everybody play a hand in cooperatively working with us to help create an environment that we will all be proud of, creating that safe street environment for our kids and giving them the opportunities to achieve their fullest potential. Thank you.
So I had a personal experience that was quite sad, quite upsetting, and quite angry. I went through my emails yesterday and I found the original email requesting from Nipsey and Rock Nation, requesting to me to set up a meeting with the chief, and I'm going to read it to you. This was dated February 26th. Our goal is to, was sent to me, our goal is to work with the department to help improve communication, relationships, and work towards changing the culture and dialogue between LAPD and the inner city. We want to hear about your new programs, and your goals for the department, as well as how we can help stop gang violence and help you help kids. So it takes time to set up meetings. We did. It was set up for yesterday. And the chief called me on Sunday and told me, this was 15 minutes after, that Nipsey Hussle had been assassinated and murdered. I was ready for the meeting. I was excited about the meeting. Here was somebody coming in to say, how can we help? How can we be a partner? So Sunday morning, I took out my clothes for Monday. What is this called? Save the Children tie. It's all ready to go. And then I got the chief's call. And then I started getting other calls, so I put out a note out of respect, saying that, here, this horrible thing happened one day before we were going to have this meeting. Why couldn't we have had the meeting the day before instead of the day after? And you get 10, 12 people criticize, but to date, on the email, people that have gotten in contact, looked at this, believe in building bridges, 4 million people. 4,015,000 people. So the meeting will happen. It will happen when Rock Nation and and Nipsey's family will come together. And I promise you, whether from the upper levels of this or from the bottom level of this, that I want to help do what he wanted to do. And he wanted us to do that. And so did these 4 million people who've contacted me. Thank you.
Finally, Chief Moore will brief the context about this killing as well as crime in South Los Angeles right now, particularly in 77th Division and nearby, and then we'll answer your questions. Chief Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Supervisor, Councilman Marquise Harris Dawson, Councilman Rodriguez, our community and faith leaders that are with us today, our command staff. We join, as does all of Los Angeles, in a somber day in the aftermath of another senseless homicide of an individual who posed such an opportunity to step into a conversation to help this city work its way through a sickness, a challenge, a seemingly tragic love affair with gun violence. Today's conversation is a broader context because there's moments in time that you have as individuals, whether it be a chief or a police officer or a member of the media or faith leaders, that you look down on a message or you hear a call and you just find it so, like, you take a second guess or you take a second look. Sunday afternoon was that for me. Sunday afternoon, this department in the last 3 months had seen an error where last year we saw the second fewest number of homicides in this city in more than 50 years. We saw a reduction in overall violent and Part 1 crime. We saw 35 fewer gang-related homicides and 59 fewer gang-related shootings. But yet, as I had reported approximately 2 to 3 weeks ago, we began seeing an increase in gang-related violence and in shooting violence that was starting to trend in a manner that was causing us concerns. And as an organization that looks at its safety across this community each day and works to align its resources to identify those locations that need us most, and we partner with our community coalitions, the Watts Gang Task Force. I was yesterday at the Baptist Ministers Conference, at our GRID, Intervention and Prevention Resources. Sunday afternoon, we had those all in play because we had seen a week of violence that even took what we saw in the first couple weeks of March to a higher level, particularly in South Los Angeles. Last Wednesday, we met with the coalition where we talked about, while we'd seen an overall reduction in violence, still fewer homicides, more than 300 fewer 300 fewer victims of violent crime. We had seen a recent increase in shooting violence in South Los Angeles, in 77th, and particularly impacting African American men. And it was causing us growing concerns, and we needed those coalitions, those faith leaders, those members of the public that are working to be peacemakers in our communities. We need them to step forward. And Monday, while I was not picking out my clothes on Sunday, I generally wear a pretty pre-designed outfit. But on Sunday, I was looking forward to the Monday conversation because yet it was another opportunity for this department to find ground in which and strategies and advocates and people in our community that could step into a conversation of how to stem this violence. Today, we still are below our all-time highs, but Nipsey Hussle represents the enormity of the lives that we have lost. And I felt, as I looked at that message from LA Fire, that told me we had 3 additional shooting victims that had just occurred at Slauson and Crenshaw. And I began that message as I was reading it, standing on the street, exactly where I was at. And then I saw the name Nipsey Hussle, and I looked at that again, and I looked at it again, and it was like, I could not believe it. It was like, it just drove the added violence even that much more severe. So I am devastated with that because this is a voice that was trying to help and was investing in his communities. But I'm also here with an air, because on that Sunday earlier that morning, I was at, with my wife, the New Christian Memorial Church in Pacoima, where senior pastor Sandra Croce stands as a bulwark of peace and of finding community safety. And I'm encouraged by that message that Sunday morning of renewal and of not giving up and finding hope. And today, I'm going to talk momentarily about where we're at on this investigation of the man we believe responsible for the killing of Mr. Hussle. But I'm also encouraged by what's happened since this shooting, what has continued over the weekend and into this morning. And that is the community coalitions, the Watts Gang Task Force, COCA, the Nation of Islam, faith leaders, community advocates, grid interventionists, preventionists have stepped up on double to not allow this to be hijacked by an individual who would want to exact further violence. I'm also thankful for the men and women of LAPD who have done on parallel course. They have investigated this and aggressively, relentlessly, utilizing witness statements, video evidence, crime scene investigation, and we have identified to this point, based on what we know, the individual we believe responsible, and I'm going to provide that information. But simultaneously, our men and women have been in our communities, not just on this shooting violence, this homicide, but other violence in 77th and in South Los Angeles to try to quell further acts. And they have been so while facilitating a vigil on what I believe is sacred ground. And last night, as we saw the night before, with such emotions and such high intensity of people grieving, we can see instances in which turmoil or altercations or fights will erupt. And I'm proud of the men and women of my department working with our faith and community leaders who have facilitated those and at the same time did their best work to provide for the safety. And last night was the most recent example, and today we have redoubled and gone back at this again to have this a community-led vigil. And for those that would attend, now and in the future, I just ask for you to bring peace. Bring peace. And not allow this sacred ground to be the site of any further violence. Now regarding where we're at on the homicide and the tragic death of Nipsey, we provided a press account last night. Following our investigative efforts, we are currently working with the District Attorney's Office to seek the necessary information to obtain a warrant for his arrest. But we believe with probable cause and degree of certainty that on Sunday at about 3:20 in the afternoon, Nipsey with two other males were standing in front of his store, as has been reported. That Mr. Holder walked up on multiple occasions and engaged in a conversation with Nipsey and the others that were there. He left and then came back and subsequently came back armed with a handgun and purposely and repeatedly fired, striking and killing Nipsey Hussle, as well as striking and injuring the other two. One requiring them to be hospitalized or transported to a nearby hospital, the other suffering a wound but was treated at scene. Mr. Holder, we have identified him through, at this point, the available video evidence, statements, and information that we're getting from our community. And I cannot thank enough that the community is the one who is helping us solve this case. As in every case, it is the community's engagement that makes our lives safer, that provides justice for these victims and their families. Mr. Holder entered the passenger side of a 2016 Chevy Cruze. It's a white four-door vehicle. Its license plate is 7 Robert John David, that's RJD 742. And the vehicle was driven by an unidentified woman. That vehicle was located in the alley adjacent to that mini mall strip center where it fled from the scene. We have, as the mayor indicated, we continue to seek the public's help and assistance twofold. People that were at that scene or have information from people who were at that scene that can help identify further and provide us evidence of the persons responsible for this senseless murder. We ask that you call our South Bureau homicide detectives day or night. You also can use WeTip and Crime Stoppers and report anonymously. We're not done in gathering evidence on this horrific shooting. Secondarily, is we want the public to help us identify and apprehend Mr. Holder. Armed with a handgun, this senseless murder, this expression of violence, represents that this is a man who is of a substantial risk to public safety and willing to use violence. And we want to see that stop. And we need the public's help in identifying him and to Mr. Holder, who I am confident is watching this and is listening to these media accounts as this is spread not only around this region, but around this world. I ask him to surrender, to find a local law enforcement agency, to go to a station and surrender, and to defend himself as he feels appropriate, but to stop this mess, to stop this from continuing. Let me comment just briefly in regards to the context of this increase in violence. So January and February of this year, this city averaged approximately 13 shooting victims a week. And that number, while it may sound high, is actually for Los Angeles Police Department and the Los City of Angels, it was at and below last year's numbers and the year before, substantially. March, we saw that number double to 26 on average. And nearly entirely that increase was in 77th area of the South Los Angeles. 77th in January and February experienced just under 5 shootings a week. That number expanded to nearly 15 on average a week in the month of March. Much of it is gang. In fact, nearly all of it is gang related. Nipsey Hussle's death and his tragic shooting, I have no information today that has that involved in this other shooting violence, and that needs to be stressed. What we're seeing here is not just a shooting of a hip-hop artist, a profound individual coming back to give back to his community. What I'm concerned about as chief, and I know our community leaders are as well, is we've got to continue to go at this recent increase in shooting violence because it's not just a dispute over a personal matter. This is gang violence that we're seeing particularly in South Los Angeles, but also on the west side and in other parts of the city that we need to redouble our efforts and keep working towards intervening and finding ways of resolving disputes without people resulting to a bullet with no name on it. So with that, we're here to answer questions and concerns. And I remind, as the mayor had indicated, that as we focus a lot of effort and energy in my remarks today and our remarks, that this still remains one of the safest times in Los Angeles. But we don't reach that safety by apathy or minimizing what we have in front of us. Each of these lives matter, and our commitment as a department, our elected officials, who I'm proud of their work and investment, our community and faith leaders, is that we're relentless, and we will not give up in seeing that our communities are safe. Thank you.
Can you give us a better idea about a motive?
At this point, go ahead. Also, I know there's Spanish media here. I want to start questions and answers, but I'll say a statement in Spanish at the end for our Spanish media. Go ahead.
So at this point, our investigation, based on witness statements and the background of those that we've identified, we believe this to be a dispute between Mr. Hussle and Mr. Holder.
Over what?
I'm not going to go into the conversations, but it appears to be a personal matter between the two of them in regards to a dispute, and I'll leave it at that. I'm going to ask you to understand that we have identified Mr. Holder because based on today, based on yesterday, what we've learned in the first 24 hours, we believe him to be the responsible individual for this killing. And I have a responsibility, we have a responsibility as law enforcement to work and ensure that the public's made aware of that, as well as our officers and other law enforcement who may come across this individual who is armed with a handgun and willing to use such violence. We're working closely with the district attorney's office, and I do not wish to prejudice this case or undermine its success by going into too much detail relative to the facts and circumstances.
Did they have any other ties to one another?
Again, they are known to, we believe they were known to each other.
We hear two women showed up at hospitals that had been shot last night. Is that true?
So let me clarify, let me talk about what we know today about the events of last night. So the vigils, I was at that scene yesterday. I'm proud of the work, again, of our interventionists and prevention, our faith leaders that were there to orchestrate and support and kind of organize that spontaneous vigil. And the conduct of the vast majority of people was well. They're grieving and they're trying to struggle through that. About a little after 8 o'clock last night, it appears, based on the information we have today, that an individual in the crowd was armed with a handgun. That he produced that handgun as a means of displaying it or brandishing it or showing it. We have no information that he meant to, we have no information right now that he shot anyone with it, but that another individual there, seeing that and recognizing the danger of that, attempted to disarm him. And in that struggle, that caused obviously panic in that group of hundreds of people, and a cascade or stampede, if you will, of people expecting, hoping to leave and not suffer any injury. As they fled that location, we had a series of falls and trips and injuries from the glass and other materials that were there, and that was the vast majority of the injuries that we saw. Were cut injuries from falls, sprains, ankles, and so forth. We did have one individual who reportedly was stabbed. They do not have a description of who they believe stabbed them, and we're operating that a stabbing occurred, and we'll continue to investigate that. Later, about 11 o'clock last night, we have two women who arrived at a hospital, initially reported a different location and stated that they had been shot. They later then articulated that they were at the vigil when the shooting occurred. We had a commander on scene at the event when this event unfolded. That was 50 feet away from where the vigil was occurring, and we do not have any reported gunfire being heard. We will continue to investigate the nature of the injuries the two women suffered. I'm not questioning their account, but at this point, I'm lacking information that a shooting occurred. What is critical, and I'm so thankful, again, is the conduct of restraint by our officers who took a number of bottles. We had a sergeant that took sutures to his hand from a serious cut of items that were thrown at the police. Our officers exercised tremendous restraint and worked closely with various representatives of the community and coalitions to establish and reestablish control and the safety of the people that were there. Over the night, we have worked with Tony Muhammad from the Nation of Islam, with our Mayor's Crisis Response Team, with Ms. Trimbley from the Mayor's Office, GRID, and faith leaders to clean that area, to remove the trash and debris, to package or safeguard the items of memorial that were not damaged for the family, and to reestablish again a process in which people who wish to visit that memorial, that vigil, are allowed to do so in an organized manner. The police department will remain in the area. Our officers will remain on standby. But I'm proud of the work of our community activists and organizers as they organize and administer and allow LA to grieve. And really, people from across the country have responded to this location, our effort to pay their respect. And we hope to see that last night is the last night of any touch of instance that we saw.
Chief, you were looking for anyone else in the death of the deceased, like the driver of the car or anyone else may be involved?
Yes, we do believe the driver of the vehicle we're very interested in identifying and apprehending that individual, investigating their involvement and their culpability for this murder.
So is it just the two of them at this point that
I'm going to say yes. At this point, the only public announcement I'm going to make is that these two individuals, Mr. Holder and then the female that was driving the vehicle that afforded him an escape from the location, are our primary interest.
Chief, can you?
But let me caution, anyone that would give Mr. Holder, or they know the identity of that driver, and would aid and abet them from being found, we will pursue and vigorously prosecute them for that harboring. There should be no safe haven for this individual. He poses an imminent risk to public safety, as well as should face justice in regards to his actions.
You want to make it very clear, you said, with regard to the idea of whether this shooting involving Nipsey Hussle was gang-related or not. And so as far as you are concerned, it is not?
Well, I'm not going to, there's a turn of phrase when you say gang-related, gang-motivated. We know Mr. Hussle has represented his earlier involvement in membership with the street gang in Los Angeles. We believe Mr. Holder is a member of a street gang. I'm not going to identify street gangs by name. That I don't believe that is an appropriate thing for a law enforcement professional to do, or executive. But the aspect of the nature of the dispute is not, from our information, anything relative to rivalries between gangs, but rather a dispute between these two individuals.
Is there anything else you can tell us about the suspect as far as any aliases? Was he also a rapper?
So I'm going to limit our remark. We'll provide more information as it develops as to his background. Again, the most important thing is his identity and to locate and apprehend him. I wish to provide him every fair right to due process and so forth, and I'm not going to paint him in any fashion beyond what I've described. Yes,
Chief,
and I'll come back.
between the time that you identified your suspect and put his picture out, they've got a couple of hours on you. Do you believe that the suspect is still in the area and that woman is possibly still in the area?
Well, the moment this shooting occurred, the persons responsible knew who they were. They knew of their involvement. Whether or not their understanding of our understanding influenced their flight, or if they even have fled the area, is of interest to me. But my primary issue is we will provide for both contingencies. If they have fled, we will pursue, whether they are here locally or they have gone to other locations. I appreciate the media's efforts of stressing to all of our communities, both locally and otherwise, that if you know where this man is at, or the driver of that vehicle, please contact LAPD so we may go out and afford his arrest. We have one more question. Yes.
There's a couple of videos, surveillance videos that are floating to the social media, YouTube. There's one in particular that is one of the networks that's taken ownership of it. Have you guys revised those videos, or what's the veracity of them? Because now with technology and many other things, some of them could be real, some of them people trying to get followers. They're very evident, they're very clear, but I just wanted to see what's the capability on those videos.
So we're very aware of the use of social media today by a number of parties. We saw the horrific attacks in New Christchurch, New Zealand, where a gunman used social media to live stream such a horrific attack. We know that those that are involved in this type of violence has a certain perverse sickness where they use social media as a platform. The legitimacy, as you identified, is sometimes in question. But let me just be clear. We are using every investigative tool, every constitutionally afforded tool for us to use and access social media to identify the person responsible. And I encourage the public, however, to use a skeptical eye and ear when they look at social media and they try to garner facts or circumstances, because it is filled with misinformation. Thank you all.